My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and last year I died. Well, technically, the doctors told my parents I wouldn't survive the night. Their response? She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. Then, they turned their backs and left me to die, alone in a cold hospital room. A week later, they showed up at my grandmother's house, ready to claim the inheritance she'd left me. But my bed was empty. All they found was a letter waiting for them. When they read it, their carefully constructed lives fell apart. If you're watching this from a place where you've ever felt abandoned or unseen, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how I rewrote my ending, how I reclaimed my story, and how I found a family that truly sees me. I grew up in a quaint, picturesque suburb of Boston, in a white colonial house with blue shutters and a lawn so perfectly manicured it could have been on a postcard. From the outside, we were the quintessential American family: mother, father, 2 daughters, living a life that seemed idyllic. My childhood photos tell a story of birthday parties with matching decorations, Christmas mornings buried under piles of presents, and family vacations to Disney World, all smiles and sunshine. But photos, as I learned early on, can lie. They can hide the cracks beneath the surface, the truths that simmer in the shadows. My first memory of feeling different came at age 5. My sister, Allison, had knocked over a priceless vase while running wild through the living room. When my mother stormed in, demanding answers, I was already on my knees, picking up the shattered pieces. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I did it," I said automatically, not even thinking to tell the truth. Later, I overheard her on the phone. "Rebecca's always been so eager to please," she said, her tone almost pitying. "Not like Allison. Allison has spirit." Spirit. That was the word my parents used when Allison threw tantrums in stores, refused to eat her vegetables, or talked back with a defiance I could never muster. When I did my homework without being asked, I was dutiful, dependable. When Allison finally did hers, she was brilliant, a star in their eyes. The differences were subtle at first, like a quiet undertow pulling me away from the family. Allison got the bigger bedroom, with its sunny windows and extra space. Allison got to choose the restaurants on our family nights out. Allison's colorful artwork covered the refrigerator like a gallery, while mine was neatly filed away in a drawer, out of sight. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my father explained when I asked why my straight A's didn't earn the same celebration as Allison's B-. "You're naturally good at school, Rebecca. You don't need the praise." I was 12 when the truth finally broke through the facade, like light piercing a storm cloud. It was past midnight, and I'd gotten up for a glass of water. My parents were arguing in the kitchen, their voices carrying up the stairs like a forbidden melody. "You've always favored Allison," my mother hissed, her words dripping with accusation. "It's like you're trying to make up for Rebecca not being yours." "She's not yours either, Margaret," my father shot back, his voice cold and precise. We agreed when we took her that we'd never treat her differently. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. The arguing stopped abruptly. I ran back to my room, heart pounding, and pretended to be asleep when my mother checked on me. Adopted. The word explained everything and nothing all at once. Why my hair was dark when everyone else's was blonde. Why my green eyes stood out against their sea of blue. Why, no matter how hard I tried, I never quite belonged. The next morning at breakfast, I waited, heart in my throat, for them to tell me, to explain, to reassure me that I was loved just the same. They said nothing. So I did. "I heard you last night," I said, my voice small but steady. "I know I'm adopted." My father's newspaper lowered slightly. My mother paused while pouring coffee, then flashed that tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Rebecca. You must have been dreaming." And that was it. No confirmation, no denial, just gaslighting and breakfast as usual. I learned that day that in our house, truth was less important than appearance, less valuable than the image we projected to the world. After that, I threw myself into being perfect. If I couldn't be loved for who I was, perhaps I could be valued for what I achieved. I graduated top of my class in high school, earned a full scholarship to MIT, and started my first tech company at 22, pouring my heart into every achievement. My parents attended my graduation, of course. They smiled for photos, accepted congratulations for raising such an accomplished daughter. But there was always a distance in their eyes, as if they were looking at a project, a checklist, rather than a person. Only my grandmother, Martha, truly saw me. Her beautiful old Victorian house in Cambridge, filled with books, antiques, and the warm scent of cinnamon, became my sanctuary. I spent every summer with her from age 13 onward, after the adoption revelation shattered my sense of belonging. "You have your mother's eyes," she told me once when I was 15, her voice soft with memory. It was the only acknowledgement from any family member that I had biological parents somewhere out there. "Who is she?" I asked, my heart racing with hope. Grandmother Martha patted my hand gently. "Someone who loved you very much but couldn't keep you. Someday, when you're older, I'll tell you everything." But someday kept getting postponed. Throughout college, whenever I asked, she'd say, "After you graduate." After graduation, it was when you're settled in your career. Later, it became, "When the time is right." Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents deteriorated further, like a bridge crumbling under the weight of unspoken truths. My father's law firm represented my main competitor in a patent dispute, a conflict of interest that stung like betrayal. When I confronted him, he simply said, "Family is one thing, business is another." Allison became a surgeon. Following in our father's footsteps, he'd switched to corporate law before we were born, but their shared medical background became yet another thread that tied them together, excluding me from family conversations. The final unraveling happened 3 years ago at Thanksgiving dinner. Grandmother Martha was there, frilier than I remembered, but still sharp as ever, her presence a quiet anchor. The conversation turned to my company's recent success. "We just secured major funding for an AI-powered medical diagnostic tool," I said, unable to hide my pride. "I always knew Rebecca would do something special," Grandmother said, her voice warm with conviction. "Yes, well, she always was determined to prove herself," my mother replied, her tone laced with that familiar, dismissive edge. "Prove myself," I echoed, the words catching in my throat. "Is that what you think I've been doing all these years?" "Isn't it?" my father asked, sipping his wine with infuriating calm. "Most adopted children go through a phase of overachievement. It's quite common, actually." The casual confirmation of what they'd denied for 15 years stunned me into silence. "Dad," Allison said, looking shocked. "What are you saying?" "Oh, she knows," my mother waved dismissively. "She's known since she was 12, though I don't see why we need to discuss it at dinner." "You've denied it my entire life," I said, my voice trembling with years of pent-up hurt. "Every time I asked, you made me feel crazy for even suggesting it." "We thought it was better that way," my father replied, as if explaining a business decision to a difficult client. "Children need stability." "I needed truth," I countered, my voice rising. "The truth is," my mother said with sudden sharpness, "we gave you everything, a beautiful home, the best education, every advantage. Most adopted children would be grateful." Grandmother Martha's hand came down hard on the table. "That's enough, Margaret." But it wasn't enough. 20 years of feeling like an outsider, of conditional love, of gaslit reality came pouring out. "You never wanted me," I said, my voice breaking. "You wanted the idea of me, the perfect daughter you could show off at parties, the one who would validate your parenting without ever demanding actual parenting from you." I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. "I'm done trying to earn love that should have been freely given." I left that night and didn't look back. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, and cut off contact with my parents. Grandmother Martha was the only one I stayed in touch with, meeting for our weekly Sunday brunches at her house, away from the toxicity of my parents' world. "They do love you," she insisted once, her eyes pleading. "They just don't know how to show it." "Love isn't supposed to be this hard," I replied, my heart heavy but resolute. "She died 6 months ago, peacefully in her sleep. I was traveling for work and missed the funeral. My parents didn't bother to call me about it." I found out through an attorney's letter informing me that Grandmother Martha had left me her house and the majority of her estate. I never got to hear the truth about my birth parents from her lips, but fate had other plans for revealing the family secrets that had shaped my life. The day of the accident started like any other Tuesday. I was at our company headquarters in Cambridge, running tests on our newest software update, my mind buzzing with code and possibilities. It was raining, a gentle, persistent New England drizzle that painted the world in shades of gray, blurring the edges of reality. You should head home, Rebecca, my business partner, Samantha, suggested around 8 p.m. The update can wait until morning. But I've never been good at leaving things unfinished. By the time I finally left, it was after 10 p.m. and the rain had turned into a relentless downpour. I remember thinking I should call a car service, but my apartment was only 15 minutes away. What could happen in 15 minutes? The intersection of Maple and 3rd has a blind spot that locals know to watch for. The drunk driver who hit me wasn't local. I remember headlights suddenly filling my car, impossibly bright, like stars exploding. The sound of metal crushing metal, the strange sensation of spinning, as if the world had become a carnival ride gone wrong. They told me later that my car flipped twice before slamming into a lamppost. The impact deployed the airbags, which saved my life, but fractured 3 ribs and my collarbone. My head hit the side window hard enough to cause a traumatic brain injury. I have flashes of memory from the ambulance, red lights pulsing, a paramedic saying my name over and over, the suffocating press of an oxygen mask over my face. Then, darkness swallowed me whole. When I next became aware, it was of voices, distant, clinical, floating around me like ghosts. I couldn't open my eyes or move, but I could hear. This state, conscious but unable to respond, would later be explained as a result of the brain injury and the medically induced coma they placed me in to reduce swelling. Significant trauma to the temporal lobe, a woman's voice was saying. We've managed to control the intracranial pressure, but the next 24 hours will be critical. Have we located next of kin? Another voice responded. Emergency contact in her phone is listed as her mother. We've called. They're on their way. Time has no meaning when you're floating in darkness. I don't know if it was minutes or hours later when I heard them arrive. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Chin, the neurologist managing your daughter's case, a calm, professional voice said. What happened? My father asked, his tone tense but controlled, as always. Dr. Chin explained the accident, my injuries, the induced coma, the uncertain prognosis. And what exactly are you doing for her? My mother demanded, sounding irritated, as if my traumatic brain injury was an inconvenience to her perfectly ordered schedule. Currently, we're monitoring intracranial pressure and maintaining the coma to give her brain time to heal, Dr. Chin replied. She'll need surgery once she's stabilized to repair the orbital fracture. Surgery? My father said, his voice sharp. What kind of costs are we looking at here? There was a pause. I imagined Dr. Chin giving them the look medical professionals reserve for particularly callous family members. Your insurance information would be helpful, she finally said. And we'll need authorization for the surgical procedure. There's been a misunderstanding, my mother said, her voice dropping to a low, calculated tone. Rebecca isn't actually our daughter. I'm sorry, the doctor sounded confused. She has you listed as her emergency contacts. She was adopted, my father explained smoothly. Informally. The papers were never properly filed. I see. The doctor's voice had cooled significantly. Nevertheless, as her emergency contacts, you're not understanding me, my mother interrupted. She's not our responsibility. We owe her nothing. I'd experienced their emotional abandonment my entire life, but this was different. This was leaving me to die, their words of final, brutal rejection. Without authorization for treatment, the doctor began, her voice tight. Then don't treat her, my father said simply. Isn't there a state fund for indigent patients or something? Mr. Mitchell, your daughter is critically injured. Without surgery, she's not our daughter, my mother insisted, her voice like steel. Not legally, not really. There was silence, then the sound of papers rustling. There's also the matter of Martha Mitchell's estate, a new voice said, perhaps a nurse. The patient was notified as the primary beneficiary. That's a family matter, my father said quickly. My mother was not in her right mind when she made that will. We've been meaning to contest it. I see, the doctor said coldly. Well, in the absence of family willing to authorize treatment, we'll have to proceed under emergency provisions. Nurse Davis, please document this conversation and contact hospital legal. We'll be going now, my mother announced, her tone final. Please don't contact us again regarding this patient. Footsteps echoed. The door opened and closed. They were gone. I tried to scream, to move, to give any sign that I could hear them abandoning me, but I was trapped in my broken body, a prisoner of my own consciousness. I've never seen anything like it, Nurse Davis said quietly. Their own daughter. Rich people, the doctor muttered. Call legal, then check her phone for other contacts. There must be someone who gives a damn about this woman. Time passed in a haze. I drifted in and out of awareness, pain coming and going as medication flowed through my system. Different voices spoke around me, medical jargon I couldn't fully comprehend. But one voice became familiar, gentle, constant. I'm just changing your for, Rebecca. You're doing great, Nurse Emily Davis would say. She became my lifeline, talking to me during her shifts, updating me on my condition, explaining the treatments, telling me about the weather outside. She'd play music from her phone, everything from soothing classical to upbeat Taylor Swift. The latest research shows coma patients can hear us, she told someone once. I'm not leaving her alone, not after what her parents did. 3 days after the accident, through Emily's one-sided conversations, I learned that the hospital had located Samantha, my business partner and friend. She'd rushed to the hospital, authorized the treatments, and was fighting my parents on multiple fronts. Your friend is something else, Emily told me during a sponge bath. She's got her lawyer here every day, making sure you get everything you need. Apparently, your parents are already making moves on your grandmother's estate, claiming you're incapacitated. I wanted to laugh at the irony. They'd abandoned me to die, then tried to use my resulting condition to steal my inheritance. It was so perfectly on brand for them. The surgery happened on day 5. I remember being wheeled somewhere, bright lights overhead, then nothing until waking in recovery with a pounding headache and Emily's voice. You did it, Rebecca. Surgery went perfectly. Dr. Chin says your brain swelling is already reducing. They're going to start bringing you out of the coma tomorrow. True consciousness returned gradually, first the ability to squeeze a hand when asked, then opening my eyes to blinding light, then the agonizing process of having the breathing tube removed. WH, my first word croaked through lips that felt alien. Massachusetts General, Emily answered, appearing in my field of vision, her smile warm and reassuring. You're okay, Rebecca. You're going to be okay. But I wasn't okay, not really. Because now I had to process what I'd heard. My parents had not only abandoned me my entire life, they had literally left me to die when I needed them most. Recovery was excruciating. Every movement sent shards of pain through my broken body. The first time they helped me sit up, I vomited from the vertigo. The first steps I took with the physical therapist left me drenched in sweat and tears. But physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological wound of knowing my parents had walked away when I was fighting for my life. That knowledge sat like poison in my veins, tainting every moment of recovery. You're doing amazing, Samantha would say during her daily visits. She'd brought my laptop, handled company decisions, fielded press inquiries about my accident. The doctors say you're recovering twice as fast as expected. Spite is a powerful motivator, I joked weakly. It was during the second week of my hospital stay that Samantha finally told me about grandmother Martha. I didn't want to add to your stress, she explained, sitting in the visitor's chair beside my bed. But you should know your grandmother's attorney has been trying to reach you. Your parents are challenging the will. What? I struggled to sit up straighter. On what grounds? They're claiming you're mentally incompetent due to your injuries, Samantha said, her expression grim. They filed the paperwork 3 days after your accident. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd walked out of my hospital room, leaving me to die, and gone straight to a lawyer to steal my inheritance. I need to talk to her attorney, I insisted, my voice firm despite the pain. James Wright arrived the next morning, a dignified man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been my grandmother's attorney for 30 years. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted me formally, "I'm relieved to see you recovering. Your grandmother would be pleased." "My parents are trying to steal her house," I said without preamble. He nodded, placing his briefcase on the bedside table. "They filed for an emergency conservatorship, citing your medical condition. I've submitted medical reports from your doctors confirming you're competent to manage your affairs. The judge has temporarily frozen the estate until you can appear in court, which is up to your medical team. There's no rush. The assets are secure." He pulled out a thick envelope from his briefcase. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this if anything happened to her before she could tell you herself." The envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with secrets and promises. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The truth, I believe," he said, standing to leave. "She loved you very much, Rebecca. Never doubt that." I waited until evening to open it, after the nurses had finished their rounds and the hospital had quieted for the night. Inside was a letter written in my grandmother's elegant script and several official-looking documents. "My dearest Rebecca," the letter began, "if you're reading this, I failed to keep my promise to tell you everything in person. Forgive an old woman's cowardice. Some truths are harder to speak aloud than others. You've wondered about your birth parents all your life. The truth is, your mother was my niece, Caroline. She was 18 when she got pregnant, young, scared, and in no position to raise a child. Your biological father was her high school boyfriend, who left for college and wanted nothing to do with the baby. I suggested adoption within the family. My son, Richard, and his wife, Margaret, had been trying for a child without success. It seemed the perfect solution. You would remain connected to your biological family, and they would have the baby they desperately wanted. What I didn't know then was that Margaret was already pregnant with Allison. She learned this just weeks after they took you home. Suddenly, they had 2 infant daughters instead of 1. I watched over the years as they treated you differently. I confronted Richard about it many times. He would always promise to do better, to love you equally, but some people cannot love what doesn't come from their own blood, no matter how precious the gift. The legal adoption was completed, regardless of what they may have told you. You are legally their daughter, with all the rights that entails. I've included the court documents proving this. I've also included the truth about your birth mother. Caroline died 5 years ago in a car accident, having never married or had other children. She asked about you often. I kept her updated on your accomplishments, your growth into the remarkable woman you've become. The house and everything I leave to you is rightfully yours, not just by my choice, but by blood. You are my family in every way that matters. I hope you can forgive me for not telling you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but perhaps I was really protecting myself from having to explain my role in placing you with parents who couldn't love you as you deserved. Know that I have loved you completely from the moment Caroline placed you in my arms. All my love, always, Grandmother Martha." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, my heart aching with a mix of grief and gratitude. Then I examined the documents. My original birth certificate, naming Caroline Mitchell as my mother, the adoption papers with my parents' signatures, the amended birth certificate listing Margaret and Richard Mitchell as my parents. It was all there, the truth, the proof, the confirmation that legally, morally, and by blood, I was a Mitchell. And my parents had lied to the doctors, probably to Allison and certainly to themselves. That night, I made 2 decisions. First, I would recover fully, no matter how hard I had to work. Second, I would make sure my parents faced the consequences of their actions. I threw myself into physical therapy with a determination that bordered on obsession. 2 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, facial fractures, and a traumatic brain injury. None of it would stop me. I graduated from a walker to a cane within weeks, surprising even my therapists. "You're a machine," my physical therapist, Jake, commented during one particularly grueling session. "I have somewhere important to be," I replied, pushing through the pain to complete another set of exercises. For weeks after the accident, Dr. Chin cleared me for discharge. Emily helped me pack up the cards, flowers, and gifts that had accumulated in my room, most from colleagues and friends, none from family. What now? Emily asked as she wheeled me toward the hospital exit, where Samantha waited with her car. I looked up at the nurse who had advocated for me when my own family wouldn't. Now I go home and write a letter, I said, my voice steady with purpose. Samantha's guest room became my war room. On the wall, I created a timeline of events, connecting my accident to my parents' legal maneuvers. My laptop became command central as I gathered evidence and formulated strategy. You should be resting, Samantha worried, bringing me tea one evening. I'll rest when it's done, I replied, not looking up from the email I was writing to James Wright. My first step was securing my legal position. James confirmed what grandmother's letter had stated. My adoption was completely legal. My parents' claim that it was informal was an outright lie. They have no case for contesting the will, James assured me during one of our daily calls. But they're trying another angle now, claiming that as your parents, they should be your legal guardians during your recovery. After abandoning me at the hospital, I was incredulous. They're saying it was a misunderstanding, that they were in shock. They've submitted affidavits claiming deep concern for your welfare. I bet they have, I thought, remembering the hospital security footage Emily had mentioned. Can we subpoena the hospital records? There were security cameras in my room. Already done, James said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The footage contradicts their affidavit rather dramatically. Next came property security. Grandmother's house stood empty while the estate was in probate, but I knew my parents still had keys. I hired a security company to change the locks and install cameras throughout the property. We can set up remote monitoring, the security consultant explained. You'll be able to see any activity in real time on your phone or computer. Perfect, I said. And I want the footage backed up to a secure cloud server. Then came the most difficult part, writing the letter. I must have drafted it 20 different times, ranging from rage-filled accusations to cold, clinical facts. None of it felt right. You're overthinking it, Samantha said one night as I crumpled yet another attempt. Just speak from your heart. My heart wants to burn their world down, I admitted. Then say that, she urged. I shook my head. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. It's about finally being seen. The breakthrough came during a session with Dr. Morris, the therapist I'd been seeing since leaving the hospital. What do you really want from them? She asked after I'd explained the situation. I want them to acknowledge what they did, not just at the hospital, but my whole life. And if they never do? The question hit me like a physical blow. Then I want to be free of needing them too, I said, the realization settling deep within me. That night, I wrote the letter that would be waiting for them, not from a place of anger, but from a place of clarity. Dear Richard and Margaret, I began, I'm addressing you by your first names because Mom and Dad no longer feel truthful. Parents protect their children. Parents put their children's needs above their own. You have done neither. By the time you read this, you will have already tried to declare me incompetent. You will have already filed paperwork to control the inheritance grandmother Martha left me. You will have already begun crafting a narrative that paints you as concerned parents and me as an ungrateful daughter. Let me save you the effort. I am alive, despite your best efforts to abandon me when I needed you most. The doctors at Massachusetts General Hospital have documented your refusal to authorize my treatment. The security cameras captured your exact words. She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. For 28 years, I have tried to earn your love. I achieved academic excellence, graduating top of my class and earning a scholarship to MIT. I built a successful tech company from nothing, pouring my heart into every milestone. I did everything possible to make you proud. It was never enough because I was never enough, not your blood, not your real daughter. Grandmother Martha left me a letter explaining everything. My birth mother was her niece, Caroline. The adoption was legal and binding, despite what you told the hospital staff. I've included copies of all relevant documentation to prove this undeniable truth. I've also included a USB drive with the hospital security footage. It will be submitted as evidence should you continue your attempts to control my inheritance or claim guardianship over me. This letter isn't about revenge, it's about truth. The truth that you couldn't love me as I deserve to be loved. The truth that when I needed you most, you chose to walk away, leaving me to die alone. I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I release you from any obligation to me, and I release myself from any obligation to you. I no longer need your approval, your acknowledgement, or your love. I am whole without you. Rebecca Mitchell. P.S. The locks have been changed, and this house is legally mine. Please direct any future communications to my attorney, James Wright. I sealed the letter in an envelope and gave it to James to place in the house when the time was right. The final piece fell into place when James called to inform me that my parents had scheduled a visit to grandmother's house, ostensibly to collect personal mementos before the estate was settled. They filed the paperwork with the probate court, he explained. They're coming this Saturday at 2 p.m. Will Allison be with them? I asked. I hadn't spoken to my sister since that fateful Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had no idea if she knew what our parents had done. Yes, she's listed on the court filing, James replied. I took a deep breath. Then it's time. That Saturday morning, James placed my letter on the dining room table in grandmother's house. The security company confirmed the cameras were operational. Samantha and I settled in at her apartment to watch the feed on my laptop. At exactly 2:03 p.m., my parents' Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. Through the security cameras, I watched my parents and Allison approach grandmother's front door. My father looked annoyed, checking his watch repeatedly as if this were just another errand. My mother wore her charity event smile, the one that never reached her eyes, polished and performative. Allison hung back slightly, her expression unreadable, a mix of hesitation and unease. The key isn't working, my father complained, jiggling the door knob impatiently. Did you try the back door? My mother suggested, her tone clipped. I shouldn't have to try the back door. This is my mother's house, he snapped. Was her house, Allison corrected quietly, her voice barely audible. My father shot her a look before pulling out his phone. After a brief conversation, a locksmith arrived. I watched as he opened the door, had my father sign some paperwork, and departed. Finally, my mother said, stepping inside with an air of entitlement. Richard, check if the silver is still here. I want to make sure Rebecca hasn't already emptied the place. The casual accusation made my blood boil. Samantha placed a hand on my shoulder. Remember why we're doing this, she murmured. I nodded, focusing on the screens as my family moved through my grandmother's house, their footsteps echoing in the place that had been my sanctuary. Everything looks the same, Allison commented, running her fingers along the antique sideboard in the hallway, her touch almost reverent. Mother always did have good taste, my mother admitted, examining a crystal vase with a calculating eye. This would look perfect in our foyer. We're here for your father's childhood mementos, Allison reminded her, her voice tinged with frustration. Not to shop. Don't be naive, my mother snapped. Rebecca is never going to recover enough to claim this inheritance. The judge will award guardianship to us, and then everything here will be ours anyway. She's in physical therapy now, Allison said, her voice steady but strained. Her doctors say she's making remarkable progress. Well, her brain injury is another matter, my father interjected, coming down the stairs with a self-assured stride. The silver is all there, Margaret. I checked the master bedroom too. Nothing seems disturbed. Has anyone actually visited her recently? Allison asked, her tone shifting to something softer, more concerned. To see how she's doing? My parents exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. The hospital staff have been very uncooperative, my mother said primly. Besides, you know how Rebecca is. She's always been so independent. Too independent, my father muttered, as if my strength was a flaw. If she'd listened to me about that driving route. Are you seriously blaming her for getting hit by a drunk driver? Allison sounded incredulous, her voice rising with disbelief. Of course not, my mother soothed, her tone patronizing. Your father is just upset. This has been hard on all of us. They moved into the dining room, where my letter waited on the polished mahogany table, a silent sentinel of truth. What's this? My father said, picking up the envelope. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's handwriting. James had used an old birthday card as reference to make it authentic. It's addressed to Rebecca, Allison pointed out, her voice cautious. Well, she's not here, is she? My mother said, plucking it from my father's hands and tearing it open with a flick of her wrist. As she began reading, her face drained of color, the mask of composure slipping. What? What is it? My father demanded, his voice sharp with unease. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. He skimmed it, his expression darkening with each page, his jaw tightening. This is outrageous, he spluttered finally. Lies and manipulations. What does it say? Allison asked, reaching for the letter, but my father held it away. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Family business. I am family, Allison insisted, snatching the letter from his hand with a defiance I'd rarely seen from her. She began reading, her eyes widening with every word. Mom, Dad, what is this about abandoning Rebecca at the hospital? She asked, her voice trembling with shock. My mother collapsed dramatically into a dining chair, as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. It wasn't like that. We were in shock. The doctors were so pessimistic. It says here you told them she wasn't your real daughter and you owed her nothing, Allison said, her voice shaking with emotion. That you left without authorizing treatment. That's taken out of context, my father blustered, his face reddening. We merely explained that the adoption was complicated. Allison continued reading, her face growing paler with each line. There's a link to security footage, she said, pulling out her phone and typing in the URL from the letter. For several minutes, the dining room was silent except for the tiny audio coming from Allison's phone, my parents' voices, clear and unmistakable, stating I wasn't their daughter, that they owed me nothing, that they wouldn't authorize treatment. You left her to die, Allison whispered when the video ended, her voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. Your own daughter. She's not, my mother began, then stopped herself, as if realizing the futility of the lie. Not what? Not your daughter, Allison said, her voice rising. Because according to these documents, she absolutely is. She brandished the adoption papers included with the letter, her hands trembling. You legally adopted her. You raised her for 28 years, and then you abandoned her when she needed you most. You don't understand the complexities, my father started, his lawyerly tone faltering. I understand perfectly, Allison cut him off, her voice sharp with conviction. I've always known you treated her differently. I thought it was because she was so self-sufficient, so competent. I never imagined it was because you didn't consider her your real daughter. My mother straightened, reverting to the haughty demeanor she used when challenged. We gave her everything, an excellent education, every opportunity. Except love, Allison finished, her voice quiet but devastating. Except the one thing she actually needed. On the security feed, I watched my sister's realization unfold, the pieces falling into place, the recognition of patterns she'd observed but never fully understood. All those times you dismissed her achievements, she said slowly, her voice heavy with dawning horror. All those times you made her feel less than. It wasn't because you had high standards. It was because you didn't think she belonged. That's not true, my father insisted, his voice strained. We always wanted the best for her. The best? Allison's voice rose, raw with emotion. You left her with brain trauma and broken bones to die alone in a hospital. How was that the best? My mother stood suddenly, her composure cracking. We need to find Rebecca. She's clearly been poisoned against us. That Samantha person has always been a bad influence. She knows about the conservatorship filing, doesn't she? My father realized, scanning the letter again, his face pale. She knows we're trying to take control of Mother's estate. Is that all you care about? Allison asked, incredulous. The money? The house? What about your daughter, who nearly died? Of course we care about Rebecca, my mother said automatically, but the words rang hollow. But we have to be practical. In her condition that you made worse by abandoning her, Allison interrupted, her voice fierce. Her condition that you're now trying to exploit to steal her inheritance. My father's face hardened. That's enough, Allison. This doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me, she said, her voice breaking with disbelief. Rebecca is my sister. Half-sister, my mother corrected reflexively, then pressed her hand to her mouth, as if trying to push the words back in. Allison stared at her, the realization seeming to physically pain her. So it's true. You really don't think of her as family. She gathered the letter and documents with trembling hands. I can't be here right now. I can't be near either of you. Allison, wait. My father called as she headed for the door. I'll be at my apartment. Don't call me. I need time to process this. She gestured vaguely at them, all of this. After she left, my parents stood in stunned silence. Now look what you've done, my mother finally hissed. You've turned Allison against us too. Me? You're the one who called Rebecca her half-sister, my father shot back. Well, she is. And now both our daughters hate us, and Rebecca is going to use this letter and that video to destroy us in court. My father paced the dining room, running his hands through his thinning hair. We need to call Gerald, our lawyer. He'll know how to spin this. We can say we were distraught, not thinking clearly. The video, Richard, my mother said, her voice trembling. The video shows us perfectly calm, perfectly clear. We'll say it was edited. Deepfakes are everywhere these days, my father replied, grasping at straws. My mother sank back into the chair, her face ashen. This is a nightmare. They continued plotting for another hour, calling their lawyer, searching the house for valuables they could claim as family heirlooms, making lists of potential character witnesses who could testify to their parental devotion. It was painful to watch, but also illuminating. They never once expressed concern for my well-being, never once questioned whether their treatment of me had been wrong. They were solely focused on damage control, on preserving their reputation and access to my grandmother's money. When they finally left, taking several small antiques despite Allison's earlier objection, I closed the laptop. Well, Samantha said quietly. That was exactly what I expected. I finished for her. They haven't changed. They never will. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Allison. We need to talk. Please. I stared at the message for a long moment before responding, tomorrow, 10 a.m., the cafe on Cambridge Street. Whatever came next, I was finally ready to face it on my terms. The cafe on Cambridge Street was bustling when I arrived, leaning on my cane for support. Allison was already there, sitting at a corner table, 2 untouched coffees in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her eyes widening at my still-healing facial injuries, the scars and bruises a stark reminder of what I'd endured. Rebecca, she stood awkwardly, hesitating between a hug and a handshake. We settled for an uncomfortable nod. Allison, I said, easing myself into the chair opposite her, my body still protesting every movement. She pushed one of the coffees toward me. Black with 1 sugar. You still take it that way? I nodded, surprised she remembered. Thanks. I didn't know, she blurted out, her voice thick with emotion. About the hospital, about them leaving you there. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said, and I did. Allison had many faults, but deliberate cruelty wasn't one of them. Did you read the entire letter? She nodded miserably. And watched the video. I can't believe they would do that to anyone, let alone their own daughter. Not their daughter, I corrected automatically, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Not in their eyes. But you are, legally, she said, her voice firm. And, well, we grew up together. You're my sister. She reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back slightly, the reflex born of years of guarded caution. 28 years, Allison, I said, my voice steady but laced with pain. 28 years of watching them love you completely while measuring out affection to me like it was a limited resource. Did you really never notice? She flushed, her eyes dropping to the table. I noticed they were harder on you. I thought it was because you were the oldest or because you were so smart. They had higher expectations. They told the hospital staff I wasn't their real daughter, that they owed me nothing, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Those weren't heat-of-the-moment words. That was their truth. It's not my truth, Allison insisted, her eyes meeting mine with a fierce intensity. You're my sister, my big sister who taught me to ride a bike. helped me with my college applications, stood up for me when I totaled Dad's car. I had done all those things because that's what big sisters do, even when they're jealous of the golden child, even when they're starving for the love that's showered on their sibling. "What do you want from me, Allison?" I asked, my voice direct. She looked taken aback by the question's bluntness. I want us to be sisters again. Real sisters. I've missed you these 3 years. And our parents? Where do they fit in this vision? Her expression darkened. I don't know. I'm not speaking to them right now. What they did, I can't forgive it. They'll pressure you to reconcile, I warned. They'll minimize what happened, rewrite history. I know their playbook. She managed a weak smile. I've had a front row seat to their revisionist history. We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe's noise, clinking cups, murmured conversations, washing over us like a tide. "Can I ask you something?" Allison finally said. "The letter you left them, what did it actually say?" "The whole thing." I took a sip of coffee, considering, then pulled out my phone and opened the document where I'd saved the final version. I read it aloud to her, my voice steady, each word carrying the weight of years of unspoken pain and hard-won clarity. When I finished, Allison was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "That's the most honest thing I've ever heard," she whispered. "And the saddest." I put my phone away. It needed to be said. "They called me 6 times yesterday," she said, wiping her eyes. "Left voicemails about how worried they are about you, how they want to help with your recovery." She shook her head in disgust. "It's like they live in an alternate reality." "They do," I agreed. "One where they're always the heroes of the story." "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "With the inheritance? With the guardianship claim?" "James is handling it," I said. "The hospital footage alone should sink their case." After that, I shrugged, a small smile tugging at my lips. I move on. I build a life without them in it. And me? Her voice was barely audible, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard from her. Is there room in that life for me? I studied my sister, my biological half-sister, as it turned out, the golden child who had benefited from our parents' favoritism her entire life. But also the woman sitting before me now, choosing truth over comfort, choosing me over them. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, my voice soft but firm. "There's a lot of history between us, Allison. A lot of hurt." "I understand," she nodded, wiping away tears. "But I'd like to try if you're willing." I thought of Grandmother Martha's letter, her words about family being those who love you, not necessarily those who share your blood. "Small steps," I finally said. "We start small and see where it goes." The relief on her face was palpable. "Small steps. I can do that." We finished our coffees, talking cautiously about neutral topics, her residency at Boston General, my company's latest projects. It wasn't comfortable yet, but it was civil, a beginning of sorts. As predicted, my parents escalated their efforts after finding the letter. They called everyone they knew in the legal community, trying to find a judge who would grant their conservatorship request. They attempted to access my medical records, claiming parental rights. They even tried to contact my doctors directly. None of it worked. The hospital footage was damning, and James Wright was relentless in protecting my interests. The conservatorship request was denied. The probate judge ruled in my favor regarding grandmother's estate. The house and everything in it was legally mine. 3 weeks after our cafe meeting, Allison called me. "They're filing for a hearing to contest the adoption," she said without preamble. "They're claiming Grandmother Martha coerced them into adopting you, that they never wanted to in the first place." The words should have hurt, but instead, I felt an odd calm, a sense of inevitability. "Let them," I said. "The documentation is clear. The adoption was legal. It's not about winning for them anymore," Allison said sadly. "It's about hurting you." "I know," I replied. I'd always known. "How are you holding up?" "I moved out of my apartment," she said. "I'm staying with a friend from the hospital. I couldn't be near them right now." "I'm sorry." And I was, despite everything. Allison was losing her parents too, the loving, devoted parents she had known her whole life. Learning they were capable of such cruelty must have shattered her world. "Don't be," I said. "It's not your fault." She paused, then said, "Actually, I was wondering, your grandmother's house is pretty big, right?" I smiled despite myself. "Are you inviting yourself to live with me, Allison?" "Just temporarily," she said quickly. "Until I find a new place. And only if you're comfortable with it." It was a big step, bigger than coffee at a cafe, but perhaps it was time for big steps. "The East Wing has its own bathroom," I told her. "And I'm rarely home before 8 anyway." "Really? You mean it?" "Small steps, remember?" I said. "We'll see how it goes." After we hung up, I sat looking out the window of my temporary apartment. Somewhere across town, my parents were plotting their next move, still unable to accept the truth of what they'd done, still unable to see me as their daughter deserving of love. But for the first time since the accident, I wasn't defined by their rejection. I was defined by my survival, my resilience, and the family I was choosing to build around me. The letter had done its work, not by changing them, because nothing could do that, but by freeing me from needing them to change. 6 months after the accident, Dr. Chin declared my physical recovery complete. The last cast came off, the final follow-up MRI showed no remaining brain trauma, and my physical therapy sessions were reduced to once a month for maintenance. "You're a medical miracle," she told me during our final appointment. "Most patients with your injuries would still be in intensive rehab." I had good motivation, I replied, thinking of the letter, of my parents, of the life I was determined to reclaim. I moved into Grandmother Martha's house, my house now, in early spring. The Victorian needed updates, but I left the bones of it intact. The intricate woodwork, the stained glass transoms, the wide porch where Grandmother and I had spent summer evenings discussing books, dreams, and the possibilities of a life well lived. Allison moved into the East Wing as planned. Our cohabitation was awkward at first, too many childhood patterns to unlearn, too many sensitivities to navigate. But we established ground rules and respected each other's space. Slowly, tentatively, we began building a relationship based on choice rather than obligation. My business partner, Samantha, became a frequent visitor, as did Nurse Emily, who'd left the hospital to work for a home healthcare agency. James Wright joined us for Sunday brunches, continuing the tradition I'd shared with Grandmother Martha. "You've created quite the family here," he commented one Sunday, watching Allison and Emily debate the merits of different medical specialties, while Samantha set the table with her usual efficiency. "Chosen family," I corrected gently, a smile tugging at my lips. "The best kind." My parents made one final attempt to reassert control. They filed a lawsuit claiming emotional distress, arguing that my letter and the hospital footage had caused them significant psychological harm. It was a desperate move, transparently vindictive. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, ruling that truth could not be considered harmful speech. In his written opinion, he noted that they had abandoned their daughter in her time of greatest need and were now seeking to punish her for merely documenting that abandonment. The ruling made local news. Former colleagues, distant relatives, and country club friends all learned what Richard and Margaret Mitchell had done. Their carefully cultivated social standing crumbled overnight. They left Boston a month later, relocating to Florida without saying goodbye to either of their daughters. "Are you okay?" Allison asked when we heard the news about them leaving. I considered the question carefully, searching my heart for the answer. "Yes," I said finally, the word carrying a quiet certainty. "I think I am." The truth was, they had left me long before they physically departed. Perhaps they had never really been with me at all. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to the future. My tech company had thrived, even during my absence, thanks to Samantha's leadership. Now, we were developing new software inspired by my hospital experience, a communication system for patients with traumatic brain injuries who couldn't speak but remained conscious. "We're calling it Bridge App," I explained to Emily over dinner. "It tracks eye movement and brain activity to help doctors determine consciousness levels in non-responsive patients." "That would have helped you," she noted, her eyes bright with admiration. "It would have helped the doctors," I corrected. I knew I was conscious. They didn't. The project gave purpose to my pain, transforming a traumatic experience into something that might help others. Grandmother Martha would have approved. As for Allison, our relationship continued to evolve. There were difficult conversations about our childhood, about the favoritism she had benefited from, about her own complicity in my isolation. But there was also healing. She brought home takeout when I worked late. I helped her study for her board exams. We discovered we both loved terrible reality TV shows and spent Sunday evenings mocking them together, laughing until our sides ached. "I never knew you were funny," she told me once, laughing at my impression of a particularly dramatic reality star. "You never knew me at all," I replied, but without bitterness. It was simply the truth. A year to the day after the accident, I held a dinner party in Grandmother Martha's, my dining room. Samantha was there with her new boyfriend, a kind-hearted architect with a quick wit. Emily brought her wife, a painter whose vibrant energy lit up the room. James Wright came with a bottle of expensive champagne, his presence a comforting constant. Allison invited a colleague from the hospital, a neurosurgeon with kind eyes who looked at her with unmistakable interest, a spark that hinted at possibilities. As I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who had shown up when it mattered most, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with my parents' validation. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass, my voice steady and full of gratitude. "To family not defined by blood or by law, but by love, by choice, and by showing up when it matters most." "To family," they echoed, glasses clinking in a chorus of connection. Later, after everyone had gone home except Allison, I found myself on the porch swing where Grandmother Martha and I had spent so many evenings, the wood creaking softly under my weight. "Room for one more?" Allison asked tentatively, hovering in the doorway. I patted the space beside me, and she sat down, the night air cool against our skin. "Do you ever wonder where they are now?" she asked after a while, her voice soft. "What they're doing?" "Sometimes," I admitted, staring out at the fireflies dancing in the gathering twilight. "But it doesn't hurt anymore." "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe and longing. "Make it stop hurting?" I thought of the letter I'd written, of the truth it had contained, of the freedom it had given me. "I stopped expecting them to be something they couldn't be," I said finally, my voice calm and certain. "And I started building a life that didn't need their approval to be meaningful." Allison nodded slowly, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "I'm still working on that part." "It takes time," I assured her, my voice gentle. "And you don't have to do it alone." We sat in companionable silence, watching the fireflies weave their delicate patterns in the darkness. In the distance, a car backfired, the sound sharp and jarring, reminding me briefly of the accident that had changed everything. But instead of fear or pain, I felt only gratitude for the path it had set me on, for the strength it had revealed within me, for the family I was building, piece by piece. The truth had nearly killed me, but it had also finally set me free. I hope my story resonates with those of you who have felt the sting of conditional love or family betrayal. Remember that family is defined by actions, not blood by who stays when everyone else walks away. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and they might just help someone else feel seen. If this story touched something in you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they, too, can build a life filled with chosen family who truly sees them. Thank you for being part of my healing journey by listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more powerful than the one we're born into.